welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. And welcome to part 2 of How to Afford to Homeschool When You Think You Can't. Last week we listened to Shilpa's response. I hope you've had a chance to listen to that. I'll start this week by giving you the question that I put out to my chat groups that I am involved in. I'm putting together a podcast on the affordability of homeschooling. I'm looking for quick comments or longer ones on how you afford it. That is, what sacrifices do you make? Do you work part-time? Does your husband upgrade his income ability? Do you have help from grandparents, financial or in time, so that you can do part-time work? Would you be willing to get financial advice and tips? Are you willing to sell down or move away? What are your thoughts? Please let me know. I'm keen to hear from you. Yesterday I was told it's not the same as it was for us, Christine. Both need to work to afford to live in Auckland. I don't buy it, but need to hear from you and do some research. Thanks in anticipation. As I mentioned last week, the responses came flooding in. I was so very grateful and encouraged by what came my way. Although many respondents said similar things, I've left these in for the impression that they bring. Many different mentions are made of money saving and making ideas. First of all, from New Zealand. For us, we started our home educating journey on the back of my husband and I both losing our full-time jobs and incomes at the same time due to the COVID mandates. It was a leap of faith for us. My husband now works full-time for himself and I work from home part-time. We have a mortgage and all the usual expenses living in Auckland, however, are quite happy to have cut back on everything but the essentials. I may not have had a decent haircut for several years, holidays or new clothes, but we are together and happy most days. Loving your podcasts too, they're so helpful. Lara. Well, thank you, Lara. That's very nice of you to say so. Hi, Christine. Responding to the homeschooling affordability. I don't buy it either. I am a single mum on a benefit. I make it work. It's just me and my daughter and cats and chooks. We also only eat organic. To me, it's a matter of lifestyle choices, and perhaps some just aren't prepared to make the sacrifices that some of us do. Cheers, Ange. Thank you, Ange. Hi, Christine. My hubby works full-time but has flexi hours, so looks after the kids 3 mornings. I work 31 hours, but 11 of those are after hours, so evening and 1 weekend day. We have no family help, but we rely on some of the other mums and co-op hubs to help with our kids. My hubby also teaches a class for homeschoolers, which helps finance some of our kids' classes. A lot of mums I know work part-time or have a business working from home, and their kids are there and others don't work, so maybe their husbands have a good income. Also, some have financial help from their parents. Hi, Christine. It's a huge investment relative to government-provided free daycare. But given the importance of homeschooling, it's more a question of what you are prepared to do to make it happen. From the chat group that is my American friends, there are a bunch of homeschoolers on there. Katie was first up. In my opinion, she said, if it's a lifestyle you value, you'll make it work. I have friends who pull multiple shifts on weekends when their husband is off, so they can stay home during the week to homeschool. My family lives on a single income. My husband works in tech, so he gets a good salary. But one income requires making choices. We live in a modest home compared to his co-workers. He drives a beater car. We don't eat out much. I teach knitting and crochet classes on the weekends to help pay for my child's homeschooling expenses, that is, books, materials, co-op fees. I buy as much as I can used on Facebook and through co-ops. I sell and trade curriculum with other families. I hope this helps. Thank you, Katie. It does. From Stephanie. It's definitely possible, though you really have to want it. My husband is a public school teacher in music, plays gigs, and teaches private music lessons on the weekends and during the summer. We bought our house back before we had kids, when we were both working full-time, but bought based on what we could afford comfortably on one income. If I was a young mum today with one of these massive mortgages and high interest rates, I can definitely see how losing an income would be impossible. We also don't have traditional health insurance, it's too expensive, and we are too middle class to qualify for any government subsidies. We don't do any subscription services except Amazon, which I am considering getting rid of, except I split it with my sister. We buy 95% of non-food items, second-hand clothes, shoes, furniture, dishes, toys, games, cell phones, everything is used. We don't eat out or get takeaway more than once a month. I cook 3 meals a day at home and pack a cooler if we are going to be away from home at meal times. We don't go on destination-type vacations. We camp and visit family. Homeschool specific, grades K through 8, I compiled my own curriculum plan based on the least expensive or easiest to find materials in the used market. I started my own co-op based on real cooperative parent-based volunteers, so the costs are super low and affordable for most single-income families. I volunteer wherever my kids get a discount on the extras they need, such as robotics and orchestra. Once you commit and come to terms with the sacrifices, it's worth it, and we are really happy. Kids are happy too, but they are kids, so they still complain a ton. Lol. From DK. It's a sacrifice, but one I am happy to make. My husband is the provider. He doesn't make a lot by most people's standards. We shop at Aldi. It's the least expensive grocery store we have here. We don't do a lot of expensive activities. If we vacation, we drive the 24 hours to Florida instead of flying. We use passes from the library to visit parks or museums for free. I work on weekends and have grandparents that help during the week. We have cultivated an environment where a trip to get an ice cream is a highlight, or visiting a friend's pool is as exciting as an amusement park. My husband and I find joy in the small things, and I think we are showing that to the kids. Usually, I spend about $200 a year on our core classes. I buy unit studies for our extras. I shop online sales and use teachers pay teachers for those extras. I get extra books from the library or thrift books. It can be done fairly inexpensively if you don't mind putting in the extra effort. From Holly. We homeschool our 4 kids. Number 5 is only 3, for probably less than $300 a year. The only new curriculum we have bought in the last few years is math workbooks, because we have collected so many reusable books or use other resources. We belong to a great co-op, which is free unless the specific class has a fee. We did high school biology a couple of years ago, and there was a cost for the dissection section. My husband is an associate pastor and fixes computers on the side, and I work for my church, teach piano lessons, and dye yarn, Mystery Mouth Yarn Co. We bought our house before we had kids, almost 20 years ago, and we drive ancient minivans. I guess it is a sacrifice, but I wouldn't trade these years with my kids for all the money on earth. From Amy. Honestly, I don't know how folks do it now. The actual education can be super cheap if parents put in the effort, but just living these days needs 2 incomes or to live very frugally. And I'll say I'm referring to families who are just starting out. The cost of a new family with preschoolers is insanely more expensive than it was when I was doing it. House insurances here have doubled and tripled. Car insurance too, and of course the cost of food. So even doing all the things others have suggested, if you are just now buying a home, it's hard to do that on one income here, unless your husband makes really good money. My comment here is that may be different depending on which state you are living in the US and whether you are living in the cities or a bit more rural. So yep, maybe some variety of just how frugal one has to be. And a response to that, someone else in this chat group said, "This is along my thoughts too. The expense of living is astronomical. The current housing market is insane, and unless one's spouse's income is above average, buying a home is almost impossible. My son is expecting their first soon, and they are planning to homeschool, but I watch them struggle to make ends meet now, and it makes me sad that everything is stacked against them. He is working 2 jobs just to pay the rent, utilities, and food." Karen's contribution. I homeschooled my girls for 4 years in the late 90s. I wanted to do it longer but was talked out of it, which I totally regret. But I worked evenings then, and we went through the PA Cyber School program, and I didn't pay a dime for it. My supplies, including a computer and printer for each of my girls and curriculum, were all laid out for me. I spoke once a week or more if I needed to a certified teacher. We worked at our own pace, and by the time my older daughter went to public school, she was an entire year ahead of her classmates in her studies. Amy's response to Karen is that method is pretty popular now, and in my state it's actually a virtual public school and is not legally homeschooling. The support group I run for homeschoolers is one of the few that accepts those families because I find it's a good gateway drug to traditional homeschooling. Karen responding to what DK said about cultivating an environment where a trip to get ice cream is a highlight or visiting a friend's pool is as exciting as an amusement park. This, says Karen, is a huge win. Contentment is so underrated in our society, and it holds so much value. Here are some responses from Australia. Nick says, "We dehydrate everything and anything and leave small waste to go back into the garden. We have learned canning. We have guinea pigs and rabbits for meat. I crochet blankets, jumpers, jackets, beanies and fingerless gloves to keep warm. I sell what I can. You do need more than one income, or Hub needs to earn a decent wage." From Belle, "I'm a single mum, divorced, and we get a single parent pension, family and AIC help, as well as a carer's allowance. I'd do anything I have to keep her home now, but at the moment with just this and child support, we're doing fine. We're in state housing, so it's only ever 25% of income, and I'm not responsible for repairs. Family also send through extra funds in the year for birthdays and Christmas. We go camping for holidays, and we have a crap old car." Pistorius said, "If you're paying 9,000 Australian a year for a Catholic school, and the children can guide their own work while you're working, which they prefer during senior years, then homeschool is cheaper. And of course, there are no uniforms, travel costs, and you don't have a panic getting to school every morning. I guess it's probably not feasible for primary students, that is to be working full-time while your children are at home. I only started homeschooling in year 8. Homeschool restores and empowers relationships, and when you have the right relationships, you start to realize what's right side up. There's no other way, except for small communities where we cooperate on a family basis to homeschool together. We must secure the existence of our communities and a future for our children that's not like the toxic slave world we grew up in. I would just comment I didn't find textbooks expensive because they're all included in the Coach House program. You get a massive box of goodies in the post with everything you need for the year. They do all the bulk buying for you. From Tay. We didn't start until grades 5 and 7, and it was forced thanks to COVID lockdowns. We loved it so much that we kept going. The kids were in a private school at just over 20k a year, including books, uniforms and camps. I quit my job, hubby kept his, which is his own business, and frankly, God just blessed us abundantly. We expected to see a massive loss in our financial outcomes, but we didn't. We grew a lot of our own food, still having to buy some veggies and fruit, and buy in bulk, a beast at a time, and freeze it. Or buy pantry items in bulk from bulk suppliers. But we don't eat processed food, so it's easier. And I took the prepping probably a little more next level than I intended to. I am a stickler for never paying full retail for anything and buying as good a quality as I can afford. Buy once, cry once. I did realise very early on that with only 2 kids in homeschool, any way you look at it, there is no sense in scanning and printing copies of student manuals. The cost of paper and ink far outweighs the cost of purchasing those seemingly more expensive student manuals. But I also negotiate with suppliers. Homeschool books are expensive. I would do my ordering for the next year, usually about August, September, and buy as much as I can from the one supplier and negotiate a very large discount, often 25 to 30%, or look around for a better supplier. There is a supplier in New Zealand who is far cheaper to deal with than a lot of the Australian suppliers, even with the added cost of freight, and they are also beautiful people. I found Amazon the lowest cost for books, reading books as opposed to textbooks, but I still use booko.com to check for better prices, or I'd buy from second-hand places like thrift books. This was great when the US dollar was healthier than it is now against the greenback. I set a detailed homeschool budget in August of each year for the following year and then would work hard to come in under it. The overwhelming benefit we experienced, which we can't put a price on, was the harmony of our home, which some of you have already mentioned. With me no longer working, the family was no longer getting my dregs of energy. I wasn't rushed from pillar to post, and my mum guilt was no longer constantly overflowing. All of a sudden, I was building real relationships with my children rather than just snatching conversations between school, grunts and homework, and me working. The house ran smoothly, and my relationship with my husband improved dramatically. I found my purpose in life and got over the lie that unless you're a woman working full-time and juggling all the balls, you aren't worth anything. By quitting work, the cost of my wardrobe, hair and makeup decreased dramatically. I could talk on this subject all day long. There is so much more to say. Now that they are in years 9 and 11, I am doing a little part-time work and volunteer work from home, but that's because my skill set allows me to do that. Sarah says, managed on 1 blue-collar income while homeschooling 4. Frugal living was the go. School books and the necessary subjects were sourced second-hand. Latterly, resources are abundant on the internet. Family life was full and fun, and my children are still much closer than I believe they would be had they gone to school. Concentrating on maths, English and science was my main focus. Then my children led with their interests. Lots of practical living, cooking, sewing, gardening. My favourite sayings were, homeschool, don't school at home. And if peer group socialisation was really a thing, kids would be born in litters. I like that. And Chelsea from an international chat group, so I'm unsure of where she lives. We do a lot to afford our homeschool life. My husband works as a pharmacist and has changed his location every few years so that there's more opportunity to earn more money. We don't do a curriculum that's open and go. We piece together what works, looking for used copies or borrowing from libraries. Those pre-made boxed sets are wildly expensive. We have a savings account for our homeschool expenses, and our bank automatically transfers money to it each time my husband gets paid. We don't notice the money, but each spring our curriculum budget is waiting on us. My husband sometimes picks up extra work. He was a lifeguard for a while. He also had 2 pharmacy jobs at one point. I will babysit for friends with younger children for extra money when it's offered. I've also worked for our church for a short time, and my mother-in-law helped with homeschooling while I went. We live in a much smaller, simpler house than most pharmacists buy in our area. We thrift our clothes, and we both drive paid-off older cars. Nancy, who is a retired homeschooling mum, says, I always felt that when my house was nice, my home suffered, and vice versa. I wish I had simplified my home more. For me to stay home, my husband delivered pizzas as a part-time job. I cooked from scratch and was very frugal. For curriculum, focus on what needs to be learned, not on all the different curricula. Sometimes you can use very inexpensive things to teach. Pray and enjoy your children. So after reading all of these responses that came in, here are some thoughts. The common denominator is the commitment to homeschool. The parents know what they are doing and why. Therefore, the sacrifices they make are worthwhile to them. Overall, those who answered my call have no regrets and are willing to make whatever financial decisions it takes to continue. I clearly saw contentment and satisfaction in family dynamics. Not only was I surprised and delighted with the response, but I am also so encouraged to hear what life is like now for home educating families. And I am so relieved to know my instinct of not buying the affordability insistence of my friend, not because I was right, but because families can figure out a way to raise a family in the way they want to. It's not easy. I know it's not easy. And you can find my experiences back in podcast number 15. What I didn't hear was whether anyone had moved to where it was more affordable or had sought financial advice. One thing I'd like to explore more is the desire to increase one's income rather than constantly trying to be more and more frugal as the value of our money decreases. Mostly that's not a natural thing for most of us, but it could be explored and learned. And I don't mean buying into MLMs. I'm wondering if it would be helpful to keep a resource of tips, advice and experience. Please let me know what you want. I don't think this is going to be the last podcast I do on affordability, and I would be so grateful if you could pass this around to other homeschoolers who you know are going to be appreciative of all of this advice that other homeschoolers have so generously offered us. Thank you so much. And if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, would you please do me the favor of subscribing to my channel? Thanks so much.